Hello, and welcome to another segment of Intersections, Policy, Program, and Practice Exchange. My name is Elisa Gwilliam, and today I have the pleasure to be talking to Executive Director of Mental Health America Dutchess, Andrew O'Grady, and Professor of Psychology and Director of the Center of Aging and Disability Policy at Mount St. Mary College, and co-founder of NOAR, the National Organization of Adult Addiction and Recovery, Dr. Larry Force. So Larry, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Alyssa, for moderating this. And it's always good to get together and have this discussion. This is a very important discussion because of the fact that it involves the family system. And one of the things that we're going to hear today is the impact of addiction and, more importantly, on recovery on the family system. So again, thank you for moderating this. And at this point, I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, Andrew O'Grady, Executive Director of Mental Health of America of Dutchess County. Andrew?
Thank you, Larry. How are you?
Doing good.
All right, we're all doing good. So today I'm very excited because we have a part two of a session we did 2 weeks ago with Brenna Hackbarth, and her mother's joining us. So we're going to be talking about addiction and the impact, as Larry said, on the family. I think, you know, that one of the most beautiful things in the world is watching the light come on in someone's eyes after they've been lost to addiction and darkness for so long. And that, to me, you know, I look at Brenna and I see Brenna when we see each other personally, and just there's a light. And there wasn't a light when things are bad. And so I'm really happy for that light. But today we're going to talk to Brenna. We're going to follow up with our meeting from 2 weeks ago. Maybe start off with asking Brenna if you had any thoughts after we met and we talked. And then Lynn, her mom is here, and Eileen's going to talk a little bit about what the whole process was like to the family and how the dynamics of the family changes with addiction and how it then changes back, or it changes in a different way when someone gets sober and healthy. So Brenna, have you had any thoughts since our last conversation, and you know, maybe thought about what was discussed and maybe wanted to add anything? Or
so I definitely did. I mean, I watched the video and I had feedback from people who also watched the video. And my mom said something funny the other day. She said, "I hope this doesn't bring back too many bad memories." And to me, it doesn't. I mean, it makes me, because it seems like it was so long ago that it's almost a different life to me. But when I talk about it, when I think about it, when I bring myself back to that, it keeps it so real to me. Like I could go right back to that lifestyle in a second if I choose to. So I like reflecting on that life because that isn't who I am anymore. And it helps me to think about those times.
And that's why I guess going to meetings and telling your story, if you're the type of person that embraces the 12-step programs, you know, why that is so important, to kind of keep reminding yourself of that. Eileen, welcome. So things were difficult for you 2 years prior to, you know, the whole acknowledgement that Brenna had an issue with alcoholism, and it just got steadily worse. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like?
You know, in doing this and talking about this, as Brenna said, it certainly brings it all back. It's upsetting. Like I'll probably cry during this, but in another way, it's so miraculous. And Brenna and I discussed this last week. I really feel like as painful as it was and as devastating as it was for me and for the whole family, and certainly for Brenna, I learned so much through the process that I feel like we have a totally, I can't even say a different relationship. We have a relationship now that we probably didn't really have before. You know, it's kind of like, you know, you go along teenage years, college years, and you're a mother and you're caring about and you're checking in, but we didn't really have that like real closeness or real exchange of a relationship, and that's far different than it is now. But in looking back, I mean, denial is just like such an unbelievable thing. It really truly, it like robs you of your intelligence and your intuition. Like I feel like I'm a pretty intelligent person, and I've always been willing to learn, but the denial was so strong in knowing that there was really something wrong with Brenna. Obviously, I mean, it was so physically apparent as well as emotionally apparent, and I would find myself like going to the computer and like looking things up, like excessive bruising and yellowing skin and distended stomach, and knowing that everything pointed to alcoholism, and just putting that information in my drawer and closing it and never talking about it, never, you know what I mean? It was just until like the brick wall finally fell on me, the brick wall, like Larry's background, finally fell on me when a friend of Brenna said she really cannot go another day of drinking like this and continue to live. And, you know, she had gotten fired that day, and that's when, well, it all kind of came crashing down, and that was that night that Brenna was talking about when she did her presentation in terms of not being ready until the next morning, and that was probably one of the you know, most difficult nights of my life, like wondering what was really truly going to happen that next morning. And I have to say, my friend Andrew, was there to kind of get me through it, because lo and behold, Brenna had reached out to him, and unbeknownst to me, and until he let me know that, and that just, you know, gave me some kind of peace. But anyway, she's the one who really made it all, and she's the one who really got it all together. I mean, like she said 2 weeks ago, we were going to bring her to the hospital, and you know, I was sure that there was something physically wrong with her, not related to alcoholism. And I was sure that she was just having some type of a mental health issue. But anyway, so she obviously knew much better, and that's what kind of got the whole ball rolling. Now, obviously, it continued over, you know, a series of years and ups and downs, and but again, I would not bypass all that I learned, all that we went through, and to get to us a point that we're at today. I guess.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second and ask you,
Sure.
because I really think it's important that we talk about this for a second, because it will help so many other people. You allude to the fact that there was a lot of stigma attached to admitting that there is this issue. Enough that it caused you enough denial to basically write in a journal that it has to be related to alcoholism, and then shut that journal and shove it away because you couldn't even admit to your own family members, let alone anybody else in the community, that
Right.
maybe this is the issue. And that's what stigma is all about. That's what the negative connotation about addiction and mental health is all about. And that's what keeps people from getting help. So they unnecessarily suffer longer because of the stigma attached to it. And that's the thing that I have pushed for years and years and years, trying to get that message out, that there's nothing to be ashamed of when you have an addiction, just like there would be nothing to be ashamed of if you had a heart problem or you had cancer. And there's nothing to be ashamed of if you have mental health struggles, because 1/4 of us at any given time in this country, in this world, are struggling with something diagnosable at any given moment. And we all have it. But we all.
I'd like to add to that. I would probably say it's probably 3/4 of us. I mean, the fact is that, and we've talked about this before, we all have stuff. Everybody has something, you know, and some of it's diagnosable, like you say, and some of it's, you just know. And I want to go back to the opening statements that the three of you made. I like the fact of the way you framed it, Andrew, about light, darkness, you know. Brenna starts talking about a different light, looking back at that life. She doesn't even want to look at it. I heard Darryl Strawberry one time give a presentation and he was talking about his new book called Don't Give Up on Me. And he was up in Rhinebeck, and he was signing the book, and he was giving this presentation at church. Now he's a minister. He owns a couple of rehabs in Florida. And he kept pointing over to this illusionary person that was standing over there. And that was the old him. And he said, that guy that you knew, that guy that you read about, that you watched, he's dead. He doesn't exist anymore. I've morphed. And he was, talking about his recovery being tied into his resurrection and his belief in a God, and how he has reframed his view of the world. And I think that, Brenna, I looked at that video again that you did the last time we were together, and you hit it spot on. I mean, the fact is that you knew first, which people typically do, that something's wrong. It's your body. I mean, if people aren't having a good time watching you, the person is not having a good time living it. They know that something's wrong. You talked about the ritual of drinking on the way to work and how far did it get and how far, and it's insidious. I read an article one time about the best way to cook a lobster. And they say, don't take the lobster and throw it in hot water. That's cruel. Take a lobster and place it in warm water and turn up the heat. And eventually the lobster falls asleep and doesn't realize it's been cooked.
Wow.
And that's the way I look at addictions. It's a slow, insidious process. And when you get to that point, you're looking back, you're like, how did this happen? And all the testimonies that are made in the morning about, I'll never do that again. I'm done. I'll never do that again. Only to find out by 2 o'clock the pattern's back. And Eileen, the value that you bring to the table as a family member, it's invaluable. One of the things we talk about in the clinical world is that families have a tendency to get better slower. Person goes in, they go into recovery, they feel better, they change their diet, they change their pattern, they're feeling great. And now they've made an announcement to the world that it's the new me, I'm ready to do business in a new way. And families have a tendency to get better slower because they're not sure. We've referenced someone that I know that was in 15 rehabs. Can you imagine the bridges and pathways that person blew up along the way? Telling people and family members, I got it this time, I'm going to do it. But something on that 15th rehab clicked, and now that person has over 20 years of sobriety. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that issue. I mean, your daughter goes into rehab, everybody's like rallying around. What were you feeling? I mean, besides praying and the testimony that you gave to Andrew for being present, which is a theme that we're trying to promote loud and clear in our video cast here, that you don't have to do this alone. He's a family friend. Somebody picked up the phone and he appeared. What a testimony to him. And the fact is, maybe we can go back to this. How did, from the point of leaving rehab, you knew what the problem was going in, but how were you able to provide support as she was coming out?
Well, I mean, I certainly had the advantage of, I have a very, very good friend who has been sober for like 45 years. And so it's not like this was all new to me. I mean, actually, Brenna's dad, my first husband, went through rehabs a couple of times when we were together. So, but I have to say it's a whole different thing, as I'm sure you know, and anybody that has children knows, that when it's your child, it's certainly much different than when it's your partner. But I feel like it's funny because I said to Brenna the other day, well, I feel like I was really proactive. And so she goes, when did you start? When did you start to get proactive? And she has a very good point. As I said, I lived in denial for a very long time. And, but when she did go into rehab, I do think that I became a sponge. And I said this in Andy's meetings that I used to go to. Like, knowledge is power. I mean, it truly is. And I feel like the more I learned about the disease, the more I was able to accept the fact that this was going on and accept the fact that I as well could do something to help. I mean, you know, it's a weird thing to be a parent and as I'm sure you've all experienced in different ways, know that you can't fix this issue. But I certainly could fix myself. And I guess that's where the proactiveness came in. And I certainly had the advantage of being in the company of very knowledgeable people, and I just immersed myself in it truly. Both her counselors, her friends that she met through the program, they were all willing to help me as well, and it is a very humbling experience to know that you really have to ask for help, you know, as well as asking Andy. And I had a counselor also who has her CAC, and you know, so she was extremely helpful. But you know, there was a lot of work that I had to do for myself, and I guess going back to Brenna's friends, I feel like they were the ones who really taught me how to love and accept, and that was like truly like kind of a mantra, and still probably continues to be. It's like I didn't even really know how to just love her or how to just talk to her. So they were extremely helpful. So I guess you know, just thinking about everybody else's story and everybody else's process, it's just you know, if I could help one person just by saying to listen and to learn and to accept and to love, you know, that's kind of how I felt like I helped when she came out of rehab. And it's a continual struggle. I can't really say struggle. It's a continual job, I would say.
Well, it's a continual, I think it's a continual vigilance for all of us. I mean, one of the main slogans of a fellowship program is one day at a time.
Right.
And the fact is that recovery is a day at a time. You know, it's to be staying in the moment. I mean, Brenna, you should be so proud about the fact that you're standing here giving testimony to the other side of darkness, which is light. You know, and the reason I bring up the family thing is that none of us are immune to it. You know, I haven't really gone into a lot of disclosure about my own family system, but I had a brother that died from active alcoholism. Mm-hmm. And we chased him all over the place. We tried to get him into rehabs and hospitals and everything. And this guy was a very successful guy that, you know, addiction, I'm Irish, addiction patterns run in my family. And I remember going to him because he had about 7 years of sobriety and left. And I said to him, come back. And he said, Larry, there's only one first kiss. And I'll never forget him saying that. And the fact is, for him, you know, there was no coming back. It was harder for him to come back than it was for him to come in. And the fact is, that's very true. And he died alone. He died, not a painful death, but a sad death. And I remember my mother asking me when my brother and I went to her to tell her that Bob had passed away, she wanted to know, did he commit suicide? You know, and the answer was no, except when you look back on it, it was a slow, prolonged suicide.
Yeah.
And I remember one time in counseling, you know, he was in a rehab and they brought the family together. And the counselor said to us, you know, some families just don't know how to cruise. And I didn't like what he said because he was saying it about my family. But he was absolutely correct because of the fact that we knew how to do chaos. We knew how to put out fires. We knew how to be present and run there. And, you know, we need help. But we just didn't know how to cruise. And when he passed away, I went to an Al-Anon meeting, first one I'd ever been to. And he was dead 3 days. And people going around and, you know, I said my brother had passed away from active alcoholism 3 days, you know, from his death. People are saying they're sorry, you know, we're so glad you're here. And this short little woman came up to me afterwards. I never saw her before or after. And she said to me, oh, about your brother? And I said, yes. Because I had talked about, I help people, I don't even know their last names. And my brother slipped through my fingers. You know, to your point that when it's a family member, it's different. And she said, oh, about your brother? And I said, yes. She said, you're not that powerful. And my reaction to myself was not a very pleasant, calm reaction. I didn't say it to her, but I wanted to say something to her. But you know what? She was right. You know, we don't have the power to fix people, to magically, we can help them, but it really is, and Brent, I want to ask you again about this. There was a point, you know, your mother's over there, she's concerned, your friends are concerned, your employer's concerned, but what was it? I mean, can you tell us the day? Maybe you can. Can you tell us the moment? Maybe you can. Or maybe it was just, I'm ready.
I really can't give a specific thing that happened. I mean, I think it was just a multitude of things. I was sick of not living my life. I was tired of alcohol controlling me. I was tired of disappointing my family. I was tired of seeing my mom cry. I was tired of feeling so bad about myself, and all of it just kind of came together. I mean, I cannot give you an exact day, time, anything that happened in my life that was like, it just wasn't like that. It just was a lot of work, and each thing I think helped me.
But you know, I
don't know, but
I have to say
Go
this.
ahead.
I love the way that you framed it. You said, I'm tired of, instead of saying that you were tired of living the life you were living, what you just said, I think is so powerful, that you were tired of not living the life that you knew you could.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that is such a, I mean, that in itself is a breakthrough. It's not over, but it really hasn't started. You know, and I think that, you know, I mean, what are we hoping that comes out of these video casts? That people don't have to do it alone, that there's recovery available, even in the circumstances that the whole world is living in now, COVID. And here are the two of you, you know, although virtually separated, you know, are so unified in your voice about what mattered and how you were present for each other.
I love that. I love that, Eileen, what you said about, I always identify gaps in care in our systems of care. And I in fact, I assign that to my class I'm teaching to write a paper on a gap in care. And one of the gaps that I see that I've always known existed, but you highlighted it for me, Eileen, is that there was a difference between the rehab that Brenna was at, where they brought you in and they taught you how to love her differently, or they taught you about how to be more present in her life and be supportive to her in the sober world. And that is something that our agency might not focus on as much. And I'm going to make that a priority to make sure we're engaging family members, because, and I know in the whole mental health world, we don't do that enough. It's like, as soon as a kid graduates to 18 or 19 years old and they don't have to sign a consent, they have to sign a consent form from mom or dad. We don't actively say, come on, sign that. These people are in your life. They should be part of your life, and they're going to help you get better. We just say, okay, because, you know, why should we don't want to deal with somebody else in your life. You're hard enough to deal with. We want to add somebody else. And that's a terrible, bad thing. We need to involve the family. We need
Well,
to
you know, I've seen a couple of programs, to your point, that really have a whole specific focus on early recovery. Because now here comes Brenna out of the rehab into a family system that both recovery, as I said before, is really a family issue. It's not just her recovery. And your point here, based upon what Eileen said about the gap in service, I think you're right on. You're spot on with that. The idea of being able to work with families about how to make this readjustment. Because typically, just like Brenda said, you know, I'm tired of not living the life I want to live. You know, person comes out of rehab, if the paradigm of the family hasn't changed, what are you going back to? You're going back to the same symbols, the same language. Everybody's on edge. You know, they're going to, you know, in another project that I'm involved in, there's a woman in Connecticut that has created this program called Love and Compassion, Compassion and Love. And she is the mother of one of the children, Compassion, Love, and Forgiveness. And she's the mother of one of the children that was caught in that horrific gunfire where kids in kindergarten and first grade were killed in Connecticut. And here she is mean, what a testimony. Here she is running around the country now, spreading this message in honor and memory of her child about compassion and forgiveness and love. And my take is, from the first time I met her and listened to her speak, if she can do it, come on. There's opportunity for all of us.
Brenna's wife, Ivana, told me about a podcast called Everything You Knew About Addiction Was Wrong. 16 minutes. People should look it up on YouTube. It's absolutely fantastic. And the point he makes is that people need to be present and tell people that have addiction that they love them and are going to support them. And the whole idea about an intervention, he thought, was completely misplaced, where you go in, you say to the person, if you don't do this, this, and this, we are all going to leave you. And his point is, that's not what they need. They need them to know that you're going to be there no matter what, and help them find their path. But they can't be threatened into that. Their life is already horrible, and when you all leave them, it's going to be worse. So it was a pretty powerful podcast, and I really, a TED Talk, and I really enjoyed it. And it really opened my eyes to that.
But I think it gives some type of recognition to the work that we're doing as well, trying to reshape the paradigm. You know, your whole focus about breaking down the silos, you know, the idea of, do not look at this, you know, as an addiction issue, a recovery issue, a mental health, mental wellness issue, but to be able to look at the person, you know. And there have been some long-standing, somewhat outdated interventions out there about how best to deal with addiction. And I think the point that you're making is such a shift, that instead of talking about, you know, we're leaving you, the theme of we're not leaving you. Okay, we're staying right here. You know, that whole approach about, you know, the terminology for it, tough love. You know, for me personally, okay, being a member of a family, you know, that might be an interesting, you know, approach, but I don't see me being able to do it.
Yeah.
You know, because of the fact that it's your child, it's your sibling, it's a family friend or whatever. Eileen?
Eileen, they've always probably wanted to be you're vacillating between tough love and you know, a different type of approach. But how did you land there?
Who, me?
Yeah.
I would say, you know, I do believe in the tough love thing, but I guess I believe in it more in, I mean, I have to say I really bought into and continue to buy into the whole Al-Anon philosophy. I don't know that they're so into tough love. I think the whole thing of, you know, letting go and as I said before, knowing that you can't really fix it, and knowing that you have to work on yourself as opposed to working on the person. I was talking to Brenna earlier this morning, and I was saying, really, I guess learning humility was one of the biggest things that I can say that I learned, and in a way that I didn't even realize that I don't know. I feel like I learned this whole realm of vocabulary, like willfulness and willingness and humility and all these words that I didn't even really, I can easily say in my 60 years, I didn't really know exactly what they meant in life. But I think humility in terms of not thinking, oh, well, this is her problem, and, you know, she better do like what we say, or what things we set up for her, or, you know, or she's not coming back in. I think, you know, once, like, as I said, I did have the advantage of, you know, Karen had an excellent family education program, 5 days. Haley House used to, every time you went to go visit her, that you had to meet with the counselor first. And sometimes it was just you and the counselor. Sometimes it was Brenna, myself, and the counselor. Karen, every time, Alina Lodge, every time you went to go visit, you had a whole educational program prior to the visits, which were very limited. But anyway, so I had that advantage. But like I said, I did reach out myself too. But one advantage that I had, I guess it's an advantage, is that it wasn't in my face. Brenna and I didn't live together. So she didn't live with me prior to going to rehab, and she didn't live with me getting out of rehab. So I don't know, is that an advantage or not an advantage? It was probably a disadvantage in the beginning because it was easier for me to avoid and continue living in denial until it was not even safe for her anymore physically for her to be living alone. But that is kind of a funny thing. Like even when I went to Andy's meetings, those people were all dealing with it in their house every single day. So it is a different dynamic. However, I still think that you have to realize that you as the person, as the family member, or as the mom, have to do your work as well.
Yeah. How about you, Brenna? What do you think about what your mom said?
She's absolutely correct. She's afraid to throw in the word control because she doesn't like when I call her that. But she used to be very controlling. It was just how she was. I mean, it's not a bad thing. And I think in this process, she has learned how to just accept me for me. And that's huge. I mean, she's not kidding when she says we had no relationship. Like I can remember as a kid, even not telling her I was going to shave my legs just because I wasn't close with her, like ever. And now she's my best friend. Something happens at work, I call her right away. Something good, bad. If there's something wrong with my relationship, I call my mom. She's the most understanding, non-judgmental, just loving person. And I wouldn't trade my relationship with my mom for anything.
Well, we grow and we change and we adapt, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Can I ask the two of you one thing? Did you ever imagine that you'd be sitting here on this national podcast giving,
No.
I mean, did you ever imagine that when you were in your dark moment? And the answer is no. But I think the one thing that we're very clear about is everything passes. So there's going to be people that are going to be watching this that are going to be in despair. And our words are, which are not really our words, but I love these words. Don't give up before the miracle happens. Don't give up before the miracle happens. And there's opportunity for affiliation, care, and compassion, and people to surround you. You guys are unbelievable.
Thank you
Really
so much for being on it again. Amazing. Elisa?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you guys for joining us today. You've been listening to another segment of Intersections Policy Program and Practice Exchange. If you want to listen to this program again, share it with friends, or even leave a comment, you can log on to our website, www.intersections-exchange.org. While there, you can follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Until next week.